The tea stall sat at the edge of the old market, wedged between a shuttered bookshop and a tailor who only opened on Fridays. Its wooden benches were uneven, its metal kettle dented, and its signboard so faded no one remembered what it once said. Yet every evening, as the sun slid behind the buildings and the call to prayer softened into the streets, people came for its tea, thick, sweet, and comforting. That evening, Daniel sat alone on the far bench. He cradled the chipped cup with both hands, letting the steam warm his face. It had been a long day, another interview that ended with polite smiles and promises that never came, another calculation of bills versus what little remained in his wallet. His phone lay face down beside him, silent. No missed calls, no messages. His daughter, Lily, was with a neighbor until late. She liked to pretend she was helping by feeding their cat and sweeping floors. Daniel didn't have the heart to tell her he knew the neighbor refused payment out of kindness. He stared into the tea, watching the surface tremble slightly as the kettle whistled again behind the counter. That was when a hand touched his arm. Light, hesitant. Daniel looked up. An old woman stood beside him, bent slightly at the waist, her silver hair tucked neatly beneath a pale scarf. Her eyes were sharp, alert, the kind that had seen too much to waste time on nonsense. She smelled faintly of jasmine and old books. Before Daniel could speak, she leaned closer and whispered, barely moving her lips. "Pretend you're my daughter's fiancé." Daniel blinked. Once. Twice. What? She squeezed his arm, harder now. "Please, just nod." He glanced past her shoulder and saw them, a man and a woman approaching the stall. The man wore an expensive suit, his smile too wide, his eyes calculating. The woman beside him looked younger, nervous, clutching her handbag like a shield. The old woman straightened, her voice suddenly louder. "There you are. I told you he'd be waiting." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. Something in the old woman's eyes stopped him, an urgency edged with quiet fear. He swallowed and stood. "Yes," he said slowly, playing along. "I've been waiting." The suited man's smile faltered. "And you are?" the man asked, looking Daniel up and down, clearly unimpressed by his worn jacket and scuffed shoes. Daniel didn't answer. The old woman did. "This," she said proudly, looping her arm through Daniel's, "is my future son-in-law." The woman with the handbag stared at Daniel, confusion flickering across her face. Then something else, relief. The suited man scoffed. "Fiancé, you never mentioned." "Because it's none of your business," the old woman snapped. "You came asking again. I told you already. My daughter is not for sale." Daniel felt the tension ripple through the small space. He stood straighter, instinctively placing himself slightly in front of the old woman. "I'm sorry," Daniel said calmly, meeting the man's gaze. "But this conversation is over." The suited man laughed, sharp and humorless. "And who are you to decide that?" Daniel didn't raise his voice. "The man she's marrying." Silence. The man's eyes flicked to the daughter, searching for contradiction. She didn't give it. Her chin lifted. "He's telling the truth." The suited man's jaw tightened. After a moment, he adjusted his cuffs, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Very well," he said. "But don't say I didn't warn you. Opportunities like mine don't come twice." He turned and walked away, heels clicking angrily against the pavement. The woman followed, casting one last look back, this time not fearful, but grateful. The old woman exhaled shakily. "Oh, thank heavens," she murmured. Daniel gently freed his arm. "Are you all right, ma'am?" She nodded, then studied him closely. "You didn't hesitate." "I didn't think," Daniel admitted. "I just reacted." She smiled softly. "That's usually how we know who to trust." They sat back down. The old woman ordered tea for both of them as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "My name is Esther," she said, blowing gently on her cup. "And you, young man, just saved my daughter from a very bad mistake." Daniel introduced himself. "I wasn't really sure what was happening." Esther chuckled. "That man has been trying to marry my daughter for months. Wealthy, powerful, and completely cruel. He thought persistence would wear us down. In the fiancé story, I needed a shield," she said simply. "Someone real. Someone who wouldn't flinch." Daniel thought of Lily, of the way his daughter hid behind him when strangers raised their voices. "I understand." They drank in companionable silence for a moment. "You were alone," Esther observed gently. Daniel nodded. "Just tea. It's cheaper than dinner." Her eyes softened. "You're a father." He looked up, surprised. "How did you?" "The way you hold yourself," she said. "Careful, tired, protective." He smiled faintly. She's my whole world. Esther reached into her bag and pulled out a small photograph. A young woman stood beside her, smiling shyly. This is my daughter, Miriam. Daniel recognized her immediately, the woman who'd stood her ground earlier. She's brave, he said. Because she had to be, Esther replied. Her father passed when she was young. It was just us for a long time. Something clicked between them then, not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two people shaped by responsibility, by love sharpened through hardship. When Daniel stood to leave, Esther touched his sleeve. Would you have dinner with us tomorrow? She asked. Just dinner. To keep up appearances. Daniel hesitated. Lily would love a proper meal, and the thought of company made his chest ache in a way he hadn't realized it could. I'd like that, he said. The next evening, Daniel arrived with Lily in tow. She wore her best dress and clutched his hand tightly. Miriam opened the door. She froze when she saw him, then laughed, a soft, surprised sound. You actually came. I said I would, Daniel replied. Dinner was simple but warm. Laughter filled the small apartment. Lily and Miriam bonded over shared chores and silly stories. Esther watched them with quiet satisfaction. When the night ended, Miriam walked Daniel to the door. Thank you, she said. For yesterday. And today. He shrugged. I didn't do much. You did, she insisted. You showed up. Weeks passed. Tea turned into walks. Walks into shared meals into something deeper, steadier. Daniel never asked when pretending became real. He just knew that one evening, back at the same tea stall, Esther smiled at them both and said, you don't need to pretend anymore. Daniel looked at Miriam, at Lily laughing beside them. He realized he wasn't alone anymore. And this time, it wasn't an act.